I think the concept of sin is one that is essentially a religious one. So that this poses a bit of a problem if we want to talk about sin in a secular way, because I think by definition a sin is an offense not against some person, but against God. So if you don't believe there is a God, then you really can't sin. Luckily, I, for example, cannot sin. And of course, that doesn't mean that an atheist can't do bad things. And there are plenty of bad things and reasons why we do them. But I think that on the whole, the concept of sin is very unhelpful in understanding the nature of goodness and badness. Of course, as an atheist, I am to anyone who is religious, or at least according to several of the major religions, I am doomed to hell. And I would find this alarming if it were not for the fact that, well, I don't believe it. So yes, I think it is liberating not to believe that you are somehow subject to rules and standards and potential punishments that come from something that has really nothing to do with your own nature. I think it's very scary. And many religious people have lived extremely intensely miserable lives with constant fear of hell. Of course, nowadays, when religion has become a kind of supermarket of competing feel-good doctrines, very few people regard religion this way. A religious person would have to allude, I think, to the will of God and what God intends for you. Because you can't just be satisfied with saying that you be sinning if you don't do what your daddy tells you, or you'll be sinning if you hurt another child. Though it seems to me that these are in fact perfectly sufficient answers to inculcate the idea of good and bad in a child. But to put above this idea of good and bad the additional layer that makes it sin as opposed to makes it something wrong, I think unnecessarily complicates things and raises all kinds of questions in any intelligent child as to where those standards could be coming from, since they don't come from anything that is directly intuitive about what is good or bad. I think that a lot of religious people, and even some people who are not religious themselves, think that the notion of sin is needed in order, as it were, keep people in check. So you really often hear this idea that even though, of course, the actual beliefs of religious people are rubbish, still you can't do away with religion, because if you were to do away with religion, then, in the words of a character in Dostoevsky, everything would be permitted. Right? If you don't have God to forbid something, then nothing is forbidden. Then there's no difference. You hear this all the time, and I've had debates with religious people on several occasions, and this invariably comes up. There can be no values if there is no God. So I think that it actually is interesting, because it's such a completely feeble and erroneous idea. People can behave well without religion, and they can behave badly without religion. But to behave really, really badly, that usually takes religion. Right? By which I mean that if you look at instances of really appalling crimes, they are very often committed by people who are committed to some sort of religious cause. If you demythologize it, the concept of sin simply is a way of talking about the things that we feel spontaneously are wrong. And we feel spontaneously that certain acts are wrong because they are antisocial in some way. We have inclinations to refrain from certain things because we feel bad when we do them. And those inclinations are tied to certain very, very basic emotions. We have this feeling about fairness that is purely emotional and which overwhelms our economic interest. And that's the first thing about morality, is that it is made up of sentiments which drive us to ignore our own interests in certain cases. Aristotle's main central idea about ethics was that everything has to be in the right amount, to the right degree, under the right circumstances. And that is sometimes called the doctrine of the mean. Just keep things between the extremes so that enough of that emotional pride that will keep you going is a good thing, even if it involves a little self-deception.